Welcome to our latest roundtable. My name is Ann Vasquez, the CEO of EdSource. The cost of textbooks have skyrocketed over the past several decades. That's an added expense for college students who also must contend with rising tuition and housing costs. College students in California spend an average of $938 annually on textbooks and course-related materials. That's according to the California Student Aid Commission. Some spend much more. State leaders have pledged to address the issue. At today's roundtable, we'll explore how the cost of textbooks can be an obstacle for some students, what the state and universities are doing to address the issue, and what more can be done. Now for our introductions. First, I would like to welcome to our panel Aya McBell, a student at California State University, Sacramento, and she's also a member of EdSource's California Student Journalism Corps. Welcome. Please also welcome Carol Goldsmith, Chancellor of State Center Community College District. Next, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Ron O'Shaughnessy, Vice Chancellor of Educational Services at California Community College's Chancellor's Office. I'd also like to give a special welcome to Kaylin Nagel, Open Education Resources Manager at Michelson 20 Million Minds Foundation. Please also welcome Leslie Kennedy, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Technology Services at the California State University Office of the Chancellor. Our moderator today is EdSource reporter Michael Burke. Michael, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you everyone for being here. I want to kick off the discussion today by turning to Kaylin, because I know Kaylin, in your current role and really throughout your career, you've done a ton of work in organizing around this specific issue, and I know you've worked with a lot of students over the past several years. So I'm curious, what have you heard from students when it comes to textbook affordability and how the rising cost of textbooks are impacting them, especially from students who maybe don't have access to low cost or free cost textbook programs?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking this. If we just look at the numbers and some of the surveys that have taken place over the past several years, we see 65% of students skip buying a textbook due to cost. And 21% of students skip buying an access code because they can't afford it, which means students are being priced out of participating in classes they've already paid tuition for, because that access code holds everything from their homework to their quizzes to assignments. And we know that often it's the students who have even more going on that are the most impacted by this. So in 2020, the Student Perks survey that I helped write, we found that 82% of students who reported missing a meal also skipped buying a textbook, which is much higher than the average. And 38% of those students skipped buying an access code. So we know the students are missing out on vital information because they can't afford it. And right now, because of so much of course material being put behind a paywall, many students just can't even participate in classes at the same level.
And we do have a student on the panel. Aya, how does that sort of, is that consistent with what you've heard from students, and your peers, and for you personally, what do students that say about, the cost of textbooks?
Yeah, so according to the college students that we spoke to on this topic, many find that the prices at their bookstore it's just simply too much, and they use sites like Amazon, eBay, or Chegg to find cheaper alternatives to textbooks. They also say that they tend to go to their classmates for help, which definitely has some negative consequences, as one student reported that she couldn't ever go back to the textbook to check her answers or look at other lessons. And she said even with her classmates' help, she felt that she was always on her own without this textbook. And students should never feel like they're focusing more on a price tag of the course rather than the content itself. And I think that's where the importance really comes from.
Well, as Ann mentioned in her introduction, that there is work happening to address the issue. And one of the major things was a couple of years ago, there was a $115 million investment that the state made that was specifically for community colleges to develop what they call zero cost textbook programs. And the intent of the program of that initiative was to rely on programs that use open educational resources. And I know that, aside from that program, the state's four-year universities, including many Cal State campuses, have also emphasized open educational resources as a solution. But I don't know if everyone necessarily knows what those are. So, Rebecca, can you tell us a little bit about, what exactly are open educational resources? Why did this major investment, specifically zero in on them and kind of maybe walk us through what exactly is the benefit of them?
Sure. So open educational resources are really freely accessible educational materials that can include textbooks, lecture notes, videos, quizzes, and any other resources that's used for teaching and learning. So it's very broad. And what makes OER distinctive is that they're also typically released under open license, right? So allows users to do many things. So access. OER are freely available online, which means it's accessible to anyone with an internet connection. And also, it's very reusable. So users can really adapt and modify and customize OER to suit their specific teaching and learning needs. And think about that power that allows faculty to really create the content and co-create the content with students to engaging in a more meaningful teaching and learning experience. Right. And then the open resource, the open access nature of it, really open license really allows OER knowledge to be shared and distributed. Right. So that really, when we think about institutional investment and funding, that really supports the sustainability of this effort. And it's really popular as an option because, again, it's free to students who are using them. It's low cost for faculty who then get to leverage the resources and knowledge base, right, that has been created with this collaborative process. And then also the customization empowers faculty and students to really co-create that teaching and learning. And also when we think about accessibility, that's also an important piece of OER that allows the content to be available for anyone, anywhere, at any time. So those are some of the important, I think, positive attributes of OER that makes it such a important option for us as institutions when we think about the end goal, which is free and low cost textbooks for our students.
And how is that kind of playing out across the community colleges? Like I said, there was that investment. Can you tell us sort of about the status of that 115 million? Are colleges applying for grants? Are they currently developing programs?
Yeah, that's exactly right, right? So we had a one-time funding in 2016 was a $5 million investment. So we see some progress in program development through that momentum. But again, because it was a one-time funding, some of the efforts were not sustained sufficiently because of lack of funding. But also, though, that really many colleges have emphasize on the importance and priority around student affordability and has really made some significant movements. So this $115 million is very timely for our system. We very much appreciate the support from the governor and from the legislature. So what we have been doing with the $115 million is really to support in two fronts. One is we have a planning and implementation grant that provides $200,000 each to every single college across our system, because we believe every college needs to use this moment to develop some fundamental competency, institutional competency around OER. Right. So then every student, regardless of which college they attend, they have a possibility to engage in learning and through ZTC pathways. And then on top of that, the balance of the funding will be allocated to colleges. We call those acceleration grants. So we are receiving applications for program plans for all the colleges that are interested in developing program pathways. So with that, the legislature also has mandated that we're really focusing on maximizing the resources to maximize impact, right? So OER has to be in the forefront of these conversations. And also we want to, it is our responsibility to make sure we don't duplicate efforts across the state, right? So what we're doing is closely evaluating all the program plans coming to us. And we have, as of today, we have awarded grants to 28 colleges, 61 approved program plans in various disciplines. And then we're also looking at these colleges that with potential duplication with their programs and encourage them to enter into coordination cohorts. So then they will be engaging in the deeper work of really understanding what duplication, whether or not there's duplication across the program plans, and more importantly, create and leverage collective resources. So then every college can benefit from these collective efforts, and all students can benefit as a result of the development of these grants.
And one of the districts that's working on this is the State Center Community College District, and we have their chancellor with us, Carol Goldsmith. Carol, I believe your district set aside $1 million for this type of program. Could you just tell us a little bit about, what your plans are, what you're doing with that project?
We have some wonderful faculty at the colleges at State Center, and so we were part of that statewide initiative for the phase one, looking at ZTC programs and coursework. In the district that we've had a desire, as Anaya pointed out, we know that many of our students simply don't have the funds to be able to purchase textbooks. So prior to this, what we had done is used some of our funding to have buy textbooks, to have a checkout program, right? So how do we get this reduced free cost out to students? So we have a resource lending library. We were continuing those efforts, but we really saw great promise in how faculty came together to collaborate with each other, collaborate with librarians, collaborate with students to be able to curate and create new resources using open educational resources as the through lens, and looking at common licensing to be able to mix and match and curate. So our board of trustees set aside $1 million to help amplify and accelerate this work. I'm really pleased to say all 4 colleges have now put forward plans, working together, our leads, and I got to give them a shout out. Amanda Tainer at Reedley College, Sally Potter at Fresno City College, Linda Kobayashi and Stephanie Kaufman and Antoinette Zion at Clovis and Madera, working together with literally dozens of faculty, trying to determine where do we want to get the biggest return on investment. So they've identified some very expensive textbooks. They're going to be looking at how can we create something, how do we curate what's out there existing, and make sure, this is the best part, make sure it's reflective of the community we serve. So we see this not only as an economic equity issue, but also an access issue to be able to expand educational access by creating these textbooks. During their first round, again, super grateful for the state. We've looked at textbooks in the areas of math as well as sign language, looking at how we can work together to really raise awareness among faculty, because textbook selection, curriculum, what takes place in the classroom, we have to have, we rely primarily on our faculty, and we know that this is in their purview. So we're just able to resource their efforts to accelerate this project. Right now we have, as I said, all 4 colleges have put forth additional projects, and about $450,000 of that $1 million has been allocated already, and we're looking forward to the next round of allocations coming out soon.
Sorry. So for students at the district, ultimately, what's will they be able to get through entire programs without paying for textbooks, or how will it look?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the project. Here in the Central Valley, at our neighboring district at West Hills, where I was at for a number of years, we had a Department of Labor grant that kind of started this work 10 years ago. And so we know that there is content out there now that is available. So all of our colleges have ZTC courses. Some of our neighboring college districts have ZTC programs. We're looking at, wouldn't it be great? How would education look in the Valley if students didn't have to worry about textbook costs? So yes, the goal is to look at courses, but with the ultimate goal of programming, the through line of a degree without having to buy a textbook. Our faculty understand that, access and success, students require those course materials. And we've seen too often it's a choice between paying rent or buying a textbook. And many of our faculty just don't want to see that choice for our students anymore. So for us, it's all about students and making sure they have the tools and resources to be successful.
And, we've been talking about this specific investment that is for the community colleges in particular, but I know that the four-year universities have also, emphasized this issue. So Leslie, can you tell us about sort of the Cal State campuses and how sort of what they're doing when it comes to textbook affordability? I know that there are some specific campuses who have done similar things that have been discussed today. So what can you tell us and highlight about what's kind of happening at the Cal States?
Thank you so much, Michael. So we've been facilitating a program called Affordable Learning Solutions from the system office where I work for the 23 campuses to support the students since I think about 2010. So started out with a few different projects and it's grown over time. There have been some legislative bills and activities that have reinforced the funding for that. And it continues to grow where we work really hard to help our campuses, help faculty become aware of zero cost course materials and to then to help them with the time and effort that it takes to adjust or migrate their courses with utilizing a free or low cost material. So this is something that has grown over time and continues to grow. We're actually responding to a notification from the governor's office that we should be able to save our students about $150 million by 2025, and that's a goal right now. So that is another aspect that we are working towards within the initiative. And that would be, again, funding the campuses, helping the faculty, getting the word out, recognizing the faculty, helping the students recognize the resources that are available, whether they're using the free and OER open educational resources or even library materials are a very big part of what we support as well.
If I could just piggyback on that question, can you explain a little bit about whether it's an opt-in, opt-out, how it actually works in practice?
Yeah, it's opt-in for the most part. The funding that we provide the campuses determine based on some criteria that we have how they're going to spend the money. It could be stipending a certain designated faculty who have applied for it or from certain disciplines. Or certain departments have stepped up and said, we're going to convert the entire discipline, maybe 30 sections of a certain course to an open educational resource. And then the campus awards them a larger stipend that they can use in the department to support the faculty in the way that they deem the best way to do that. So it's a variety of ways that are strategies that have been that we see happening on the campuses.
I want to get back to sort of the impact here on students, because I know that as someone, I forget who, but someone brought up that there was a pilot at the community colleges, a $5 million program. What, if anything, did we kind of learn on through that pilot program about how students were impacted with the development of zero cost textbook programs? Were there any specific impacts on student success or anything like that. This could be for anyone who, I know a few of you are very familiar with the pilot program, so anyone can feel free to jump in.
Yeah, if I could just add, one of the things that we saw here, our course retention rates improved, and we also saw, if students have an OER resource and are actually engaged in the curriculum at an earlier stage and not have to rely on, just taking notes, they're able to be more successful. And so we saw our drop rates improve. And I would like to say that we saw our student success go up. We're still studying that because we believe it did, but we want to make sure it's statistically significant. And I'm going to say the through line through all of this is that if you can get the materials to our students, they're more engaged. One of the comments that I heard from that early pilot is that faculty were able to curate the coursework, so they felt more engaged as well. They were working with colleagues that they hadn't worked with in the past. I think they really became engaged with the librarians, and students saw more reflective stories of themselves and their culture in the work that they were reading about. So we know that, again, the retention rates improved, and I think that is a huge win for all of us.
And I'll say we see this in OER all over the place. A University of Georgia study from several years back showed that in classes that used an open educational resource, they saw an increase of A's by 5.5% and A minuses by 7.7%. So that's significant number of students that are just doing better in those classes. And it's not just because the cost gets reduced to zero, but also because they can retain the material after the end of the term. Most courses build on one another. They can have access to it both online and offline because most OER is downloadable. And like Carol was talking about, faculty engage in their OER and able to customize it and make a really the course materials that best suit what they want to teach, which just results in a better experience for faculty and students.
I wanted to jump in with a question from the audience. I think this one probably is directed to you, Leslie. A question coming for you, CSU students. Is there a direct line to call or to reach out if they're facing prohibitive costs and need assistance?
I would recommend that they would contact the provost office and make them aware of the challenges that they're experiencing. There is also a resource or a link on our Affordable Learning Solutions website for all the coordinators who are serving the initiative from the campuses. And that could be another place to make contact as well. Phone calls, I think, probably can be effective, but a lot of times now in the digital age, folks are usually following email addresses or filling out forms if there are those. But I would say that the head of the academic programs is the provost's office for an institution in the CSU, and then from there it could be the coordinators on your campus as well.
Great, thank you.
And I would like to add from the system, just to go back to that earlier question around the learning from the pilot. From the system perspective, there's some major learnings, right? One is, how do we, think about sustainability? Even though OER is the most sustainable option, but OER content still needs to be updated regularly. So when we think about investment into this effort, we really want to think about what that sustainability looks like in addition to these historic one-time investment. The second piece is really tightening the connection between development of programs and courses into implementation, what it looks like for students. How do we make sure that actually a reasonable amount of students are able to enroll in these classes? So the program, actually the experience of going through the program is actually seamless. So we are also really focusing on really tying in from development to implementation. And then the third piece is the importance of longitudinal data, because it takes students time, right, to go through the entire program to evaluate impacts. So how do we build up our learning infrastructure to continue to refine our approaches while understanding the impact?
Can I just add one thing to that? Again, I'm so pleased with the faculty that have come together around this initiative here at State Center. They've created, and I just saw it yesterday, a dashboard of all the courses that they've identified and they're working towards that have either OER available and they're working with faculty to adopt and sharing this information. But they have taken such a systematic research-based approach, not only in terms of this course, is it a high demand course? Is it a high cost textbook? They're being incredibly just strategic and working together. The collaboration is just fantastic. And so from my vantage point, being able to get our trustees to help resource this, again, to accelerate, to amplify, to raise awareness of this important work, I think is just really key, because I think this really offers a lot of promise, both in terms of student success, student access, and both, again, economic equity.
And Carol, I know you've mentioned, and I know Leslie's talked about this, but when it comes to the faculty, I know, as you both said, there's a lot of faculty purview when it comes to developing these programs. So what have negotiations been like with faculty, and can you sort of walk us through what exactly is the role of faculty when it comes to developing these kind of programs?
So in California, we have legislated in legislation, in Ed Code, there are certain parts of education that we rely primarily on in terms of faculty expertise, and textbook selection is one of those, as well as curriculum development. All the things are instructional. They call it 10+1. So this is squarely lies in that. So being able to resource it is one thing that I can do as an administrator to help accelerate this work, that the faculty who are champions and leading it, they're working to, share and collaborate with their colleagues, raise awareness for students, and work with the counselors to raise awareness. And one of the things you did, mention was, negotiations. We're trying to determine, this work, it's above and beyond. So how do we, compensate this work? And there's ways to do it, whether it's through a stipend or we're looking at, an hourly rate. Anytime you deal with compensation, you have to work with your labor partners as well in terms of negotiating that rate. So we're in discussions to do that part now. Currently, of course, we have stipends, which how we've rolled out the first work. You can do release work, but we really want to try to do something different. And so those negotiations, I think, are going on fairly well. And the work continues in the parameters in which we have now. But it does take ongoing conversations and just to relay fears and to appropriately compensate the work that's being done, because this work does take time. I was talking with somebody, an administrator, and they were saying, well, there's open up educational resources that are already adopted. Why, if MIT has a book, why can't you just adopt it? There still is time that our faculty have to devote to this process. So I think honoring that time, honoring the commitment is super important that we do that. And I'm hopeful and very optimistic on this project.
And I also want to highlight our partnership with the Statewide Academic Senate. Michelle Pilati and her OER team has been doing work for years and decades in providing the support for faculty and librarians who have played critical roles in doing really the nitty-gritty, right? Reviewing OER material, determining if the current options allow for adoption for use or adaptation to align with pedagogies and DEI goals. I think that's tremendously important and present a huge and unique opportunities, I feel like, for our community college students. And then really also authorship of OER where resources may not be available. So having state level faculty senate to really support us in this work, it has been tremendously helpful.
And there was a lot of interest, at least leading up to the roundtable, I know from audience members, about accessibility. So when it comes to OER, is there anything sort of baked into the legislation or just OER in general to kind of ensure that the materials are accessible for students?
I can kick us off. OER definitely has expectation, right? All the free textbooks should be accessible to all students in the same way that commercial textbooks should be accessible to all students, right? So there are a couple of things. So actually the difference with OER is actually when something's not accessible, you can fix it a lot easier than with commercial materials. When locked down under copyright, it's much more difficult to fix, right? So, but at the same time, from a professional development perspective, this has been elevated as an important point. So we are definitely prioritizing accessibility to support faculty in their OER journey, in their OER journey. Additionally, the Chancellor's Office is engaging in various conversations that's adjacent, right? For example, we just launched a universal design for learning task force where accessibility is heavily discussed and thinking about how to kind of really making sure that accessibility is embedded in the OER design.
And I just want to add that work has been replicated locally here at State Center as well. This is top of mind for all the faculty who are involved. And again, I'm really pleased to have to brag a little bit at the faculty at Reedley College, and I think they're working with Clovis Community College. They're looking at an ASL, American Sign Language textbook, making sure they have an OER for that and making it fully accessible. So these conversations are taking place and making sure that our students have accessible information. And again, super pleased that they've chosen the American Sign Language program as one of the programs that we would like to have a ZTC program in.
So there was also a new legislation this cycle that the Governor Newsom signed last month. I believe it was AB Assembly Bill 607. And let me just lost my note. It basically requires colleges in California to tell students ahead of time about the required textbooks for the course and the estimated costs of those materials. So I know Kaylin, I believe your organization's sort of maybe sister organization was involved in sponsoring this legislation. So could you tell us sort of, why was this also an important issue to tackle? Why is transparency around textbook costs? Is that not something that necessarily always happens? And why was this an important bill?
Yes, thank you. So AB 607 from Assemblymember Ash Kalra builds on existing federal requirements from the last Higher Education Act that required that textbook costs and ISBN numbers be included on the online course schedule to the best of schools' ability. And that's for all schools that accept federal funds. But the last Higher Education Act was a long time ago, and the expectations for what students have to buy has changed since then. For example, students now have to buy things like access codes, clickers, other materials that are not cheap. So if you don't know, a clicker is basically a remote control that's used to answer questions in a classroom and sometimes even just take attendance. And they can cost up to $100. So, and then on top of that, the idea of to the best of their ability left a lot of wiggle room for what does that mean? So we had some schools that just weren't doing it at all. They weren't telling students at all on the online course schedule what they needed to know. So we worked with Assemblymember Kalra's office on AB 607, and by we I mean the Michelson Center for Public Policy, to make sure to, one, raise the floor to 75% of courses disclosing that information, and then also including some of those things beyond textbooks that students are expected to buy. And it's really important that students know what this is before the first day of class, so that way they can shop around, get a better price, so that they can budget and plan for the year. Maybe they need to pick up a couple of extra shifts over winter break, or maybe they have to make different choices, or maybe they want to figure out which one of their friends has a copy of that textbook, and that way they can borrow it for the term. The other thing that I spoke to several students was if they don't know what the textbook is until right before the class, they have to pay for rushed shipping in order to get their materials on time, which is just more expensive. So when students have a full picture of the costs going into the term, they can just budget and plan for the year in a much more holistic sense.
Aya, is that something that you've heard from students or your peers? Are they ever or often caught off guard by just the price of textbooks after already signing up for the class?
Absolutely, because when students are enrolling in this course, they don't know the cost. They can definitely catch them off guard. And some professors will offer a free PDF online. Some professors will give them advice on how to check them out at the library, but other professors don't offer that. So even when they're reading the reviews for the course, they might think, oh, this professor offers this, but then this other professor might not do it. So if they're aware beforehand, it can definitely help them create their schedules better. Maybe they can also take this class in a different semester, just so they're well aware and can plan better.
Following up on that, good point, Aya, for the group, is there any way for students to be able to know in advance of choosing a class what the requirements for that class might be? Or is there really not a mechanism for that in place right now? Or is that something that is on the wish list, for example?
Well, a lot of classes, so it'll really depend. It'll depend on when that professor gets the assignment for when they're teaching that class, for example. So some may not know until much closer to the beginning of term. But on the online course schedule, when you are kind of looking at all the classes that you're thinking about taking next term, schools will show what materials are required. Now, they're required by the federal government to include the textbook cost, the ISBN number for that textbook. And a lot of schools were already going above and beyond that, including things like lab manuals and other materials. So let's say you're looking at a chemistry class. It might have a drop down that has the full cost and like itemized list and tell you what it is. Or very often it'll include a link to the college bookstore so you can compare prices, maybe see what a used copy looks like versus a new one. So a lot of schools already have that set up, and it just depends when they get that information on there, which is challenging. It's challenging to coordinate with hundreds and hundreds of faculty. It's challenging when faculty are getting these assignments at different times. And if a faculty member is maybe deciding still what materials they want to use in that class, they may change their mind, which makes sense. Maybe something better came out and they want to use that instead. But there are ways for them to share that information currently.
Question about private companies that are now taking over some of the operations of many, or I don't know if many, but of bookstores. And how does that play into the effort to reduce textbook costs? The privatization.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. That's a great question. It's, kind of reminiscent of, the record business and record stores, right? I had a spirited conversation with our provider of bookstores, and this effort isn't necessarily to put any industry out of the business. This effort is to increase access and improve the success of our students. So to their credit, they are trying to evolve their business model. They realize that faculty are going to advance and accelerate this work. They also realize that there are some textbooks that they need to do a better job of. So I'm happy to report that they're becoming a partner, and they're trying to create new ways to reduce the cost of textbooks through a variety of kind of creative ways. There's textbook lending, textbook renting. They also have kind of a service where somebody could rent a service of a book. So they are trying to adjust their business model. And, I think they're at least trying to be responsive. So I'll just leave it at that.
I'll jump into the Cal State system we have a bookstore advisory group, and we meet actually at once a year with all of the bookstores up north and down south. And we work really hard for them have worked really hard for them to become aware of the affordability issues and they are working really hard to lower the costs in certain programs that they're facilitating. And sometimes it requires working directly with a professor, and sometimes it is working with the university to provide different types of fees for materials. And so we've seen the costs come down significantly for digital materials. They also, as Carol mentioned, they're offering rentals and other types of sources as well for the students. And so they've come a long way from the previous, several years ago as the previous models that were out there. We have several of those organizations, bookstores in the CSU, and we're in contact with them regularly about that.
And then I will say that this is also something where there's even some, I would say, disagreement and contention within folks that work in the textbook affordability space. So one of the programs we see that I worry about the long-term impacts on textbook affordability is the rise of an umbrella term that I use for automatic textbook billing, where students are directly billed for the course of the materials to their student accounts. There's lots of different ways to do this, and legally they're required to have a discount. Now, the disclosures around how much that discount is, the disclosures around how those discounts are calculated typically are pretty fuzzy. And very often it's very difficult for students to opt out of these programs and they get automatically billed. So it's like a bulk purchasing thing. And one of the concerns that I have in the long term is basically the Amazonification of course materials, where we see the repeat of what happened with academic journals and academic libraries, where you're able to get a really great discount on a bulk bunch of journals. And it was so great and it was so good. And of course you said yes to this. And then 15 years down the line, it made up the majority of costs for academic libraries because of price increases on that bulk purchase. So I am really glad to see bookstores offer things like rentals, offer things like the option to do digital if that's what the student prefers, the option to find a used copy. There's a lot that students can do and bookstores can help with, but I am concerned with this growing trend of automatic textbook billing that I'm seeing across colleges.
Kaylin, is that something that is happening in California as far as you know, or have you seen, or where have you seen that?
Yeah, so we can find this in a lot of schools across California. And like I said, this is contentious. I know that people don't always agree with me on this, and they see this as a great way to leverage bulk purchasing to get students a great deal. But I definitely come out of the consumer protection space. And so I have a lot of concerns when we have an industry, the publishing industry, for example, that, there's 3 textbook companies that control 80% of the marketplace. Because of that, textbook costs increased at 3 times the rate of inflation until 2016, where they just leveled off. And if I had someone come into my home, light my curtains on fire, turn around and put on a fire cap and say, "Don't worry, I can fix this," I would not trust them to save my home. So I am deeply concerned about the way that this is spreading, because I think that once this becomes the norm, it's going to be really hard to pull back on that.
We got a question from an audience member, and it's similar to actually a couple questions we got ahead of the roundtable about college libraries and making sure they're funding to support creating or using licensed materials for OER. So either Rebecca or Leslie or maybe even Carol, can you speak at all to, are there any particular efforts to make sure, campus libraries are funded?
I'll jump in really quickly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the library services, electronic collections are in under my purview as well at the CSU. And yes, we fund quite a few. In fact, the majority of our collections from our office, where we negotiate huge discounts for our system. And in fact, we saved over $30 million or even more a year for our system in that area. And then part of that is funding the campuses to be able to purchase e-textbooks and provide perpetual access to them for some, if they're available in that format within our library databases. So there's the majority of our coordinators for affordable learning solutions are OER librarians now. And they're being hired specifically to support zero-cost course materials efforts, and this is a part of what they do as well. One of the strategies is that the bookstores, we've negotiated with the bookstores, they will share the list of textbooks that the faculty have selected for the next semester with the library, and then the library uses some of our funding to hire students or staff to search the databases for those materials, and then they will publish a list of all the materials that are available in the library databases that we've licensed for the system. And then they'll also notify the instructor, who then will notify the students via the syllabus that there's a link they can go to get to the zero-cost materials. So there's zero cost for the students, but we're paying for them through the library licenses.
And I can add, librarians, just like faculty, very much a critical piece of our OER implementation, ZTC efforts, right? So when we're investing in, for example, for the $115 million of the ZTC degree grant program, that can be used and are actually being used by librarians for various purposes advancing OER. So including purchase of licenses and accesses to databases for our students, right, to acquire needed materials. So that's all happening already. There should not be barriers, right, preventing, librarian from accessing this investment to advance OER goals.
And Rebecca, that 115 million sort of long term, can you give us sort of a sense of, is that all the money you think is necessary to implement, the programs across the colleges that you want to see implemented? Do you think there could be a point where you might advocate for more funding for affordable textbook programs?
Absolutely. I mean, no, the money is not enough. And I think most importantly is we need sustainable funding, right? Because OER is critical, but then still it's lower cost, but it still needs consistent funding to support it. And I think what this one-time investment is going to help us is, one, build up these basic infrastructure so then we can accelerate the OER development and implementation and remove barriers. And then at the same time, I think one thing I want to mention is for the degree pathway programs also include all the GE courses, right? So by building the OER, building ZTC pathways through this grant funding, we're able to now support many of the GE courses for ZTC. So then, benefiting more students across, even if they don't have a zero cost degree right now, but they have, right, a zero cost GE courses they can leverage. So this is an equity effort. This is affordability effort, right? And we know sustainability for funding is what we're going for, but we definitely want to see more outcomes so that we can understand exactly where the investment is appropriate to support this comprehensive effort. And I want to also mention it's not just textbooks, right? I know we spend a lot of time today talking about textbooks, but there's supplemental materials, there's supplies that impact, I would say, ARC students and the CTE students, for example, right? That will impact them a little bit more. So how do we think about the full educational experience and the cost of attending college for our students?
And just one quick follow-up too, Rebecca. So for colleges that are getting grants through the current funding, are there timelines for when you expect the colleges to be able to, have those pathways, those programs? For example, colleges, maybe they're creating a degree pathway that's entirely, zero cost for textbooks. Do you know, is there a lot of variation for when those will actually be up and running, or is there a certain deadline the colleges have to meet?
So the deadline is really the 2026. So for fall semester, we want to see ZTC courses, right, are made available to students. That's what we will consider as implementation. So, but obviously there are colleges who don't have much infrastructure, needs a lot of support. We're obviously trying to get colleges there as quickly as possible by deploying various professional development, right, efforts. Some are more general webinar type of support. Some are kind of one-on-one coaching. And then we have our academic senate partners providing also additional professional development and really coordination, right, as part of this grant. So there are various efforts that are happening here to get our colleges that are ready there as quickly as possible and do as many as they can, right? And then the colleges that still need support to provide that differentiated support.
Yeah, and just to add, I think our reporting deadline is on Halloween to the state, so it's kind of a spooky date, but we're excited to be able to report. I mean, again, the librarians, the faculty, the academic senate folks, the curriculum, they've really been working and looking at how they're going to be able to meet the statewide parameters in terms of reporting, but really looking at those textbooks in a very strategic way. So looking forward to see that report come out. And so we'll have more to share on our website as well as with the state.
And I wanted to go back to Leslie, focusing on the Cal States again. When I report on this topic, the campus that always seems to come up is Channel Islands. I know they have a couple programs similar to what we've been talking about where, entire undergraduate programs that only use free or maybe low cost textbooks. Do you know what is it about Channel Islands? Like, why have they been able to do this? And do you think, other campuses across the system maybe could learn a bit from what they're doing at Channel Islands?
Oh yeah, thank you. We've shared this information across all the CSUs. A few others are pursuing a zero-cut textbook 4-year degree options, and that's very difficult to do because once you get past the general ed courses, those books, there are fewer and fewer OER available, and then the faculties have to spend time creating their own. So we've seen some efforts at Bakersfield and at Humboldt and Fresno as well. So we talk about it quite a bit. What it required at Channel Islands was a lot of energy and commitment by the faculty in a couple of disciplines, and they had to agree to follow the entire 4-year path and either create or locate zero cost materials to support that kind of a zero cost textbook cost pathway. And so that required a lot of collaboration, and at a smaller campus, sometimes that's a little bit easier, smaller departments as well. And so, yes, we all have promoted their efforts quite a bit. And again, we have seen some interest in other areas, but it requires a much larger group of faculty to be involved in that process in order to be able to create a 4-year degree pathway, zero cost pathway. Hopefully that answers your question, Michael.
Yeah, for sure. And what are your options for, given what you just said, and you're not involved in this $115 million pot of funding. So what options do Cal State campuses have for sort of funding, these kind of efforts if they did want to try to, replicate what Channel Islands is doing?
Well, we don't get we haven't received this kind of funding. Right. So the CSU provides some internal funding for the amount that we distribute to the campuses every year, which is limited to about 15,000, 15 to 20, depending on the campus's requests and the size, et cetera. Some have reached out to the Channel Islands has worked with the Michelson Foundation that Kaylin works for, and they have granted them some extra funds to create Cal Open Ed. And we do have a link somewhere about that. So there are some external funding sources, but not many. It's challenging in that regard.
And just in case, I want to ask Kaylin, just in case we have people watching wondering, about UC, because I know we talk a lot about the community colleges and Cal State. Kaylin, because I know you do a lot of advocacy. Is there anything you can tell us sort of about, where the University of California stands on these issues? Are there things happening across the, UC's campuses similar to what's going on at the community colleges in Cal State?
So there is some really exciting stuff that's been happening at some UCs. So one, LibreText, which is a OER project. They create OER, but they also curate and host it. Things that also include things like homework and auxiliary materials, including textbooks. They received one of the federal pilot grant programs several years ago, and they are out of UC Davis. So UC Davis has been putting out a lot of really great work when it comes to OER. Recently, the UC Regents and several of the schools have formed a textbook affordability and OER task force to start talking about these issues. Now, this came after years and years of individual campuses doing what they can. So, for example, UCLA's library has a grant program that they run out of their own budget. It doesn't have a ton of funds, but they're able to do some good work. UC Riverside, back when I was a community organizer on their campus, had a small program. I'm not sure if that's been sustained. And I know that several other campuses have small programs that are run out of their libraries, usually from their library's own budget. So there hasn't been significant UC-wide funding put towards this effort yet, but we are starting to see the beginnings of movements. And I want to shout out the student organizers all across the UCs who have been meeting with UC regents, collecting petition signatures, passing student government resolutions, and building visibility on those campuses for over a decade to help get the ball moving to where it is now. Ultimately, though, we do need to make sure that these campuses, whether they're UC, the CSU, or the community colleges, have the financial support that they need from not just foundations like ours. We're not a large foundation, we're a small family foundation, but also the state, to make sure that education, which is a public good, is accessible to everyone, and we make sure to fund the programs that are producing the materials needed to sustain that.
If I could just add to that, the student voice on this and their organizing, I just want to, again, give a shout out to our student trustee who helped bring this matter forward to our trustees. And I think hearing from that student voice is so important. And it allowed at least our board to take action on top of what the state has already done. So for all those student advocates and student organizers and students in general, yes, please continue that work, because your voice matters and it does make a difference.
And may I jump in, Michael? You have brought up now the UCs, the CSUs, and the community colleges. I just want to emphasize that we all work together regularly. We just met last week in Sacramento. We collaborate on many of these issues. We coordinate a intersegmental conference on OER every summer, very successful. And we support one another in our various initiatives as much as possible as well. So it's this has definitely highlighted a very strong intersegmental partnership for the California higher education space.
And we still have time for one more. If we do, I want to just ask Kaylin also about, what's happening outside of California. Are there any, states that, as California sort of continues to try to, make progress here, are there any states that are doing anything particularly innovative that maybe California can learn from?
So I'll say that OER is not just a US movement, but part of an international movement. And California's been doing great work, but there are some states who have been doing really fantastic work. Oregon and Washington have led the way in a lot of cases. They provide a lot of trainings that other states can attend. I want to give a shout out to the SUNY system, who saved students over $90 million with over 3,000 faculty participating in their program. Affordable Learning Georgia, which has saved students $140 million. And the University of Minnesota's Open Education Network, they have a really beautiful repository, which is basically an online library for OER, and have provided trainings for faculty and educators across the country through that project.
All right. Well, we are near the hour mark. This has been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank every one of our panelists who took the time out of their day to join us and really engage on a very important topic. And for those of you working behind the scenes, helping to answer the questions from the audience. Also, thank you to the audience for asking such great questions. Really, the engagement is something that we always enjoy at these roundtable discussions. And again, thank you to the College Futures Foundation for making today's conversation possible. Have a wonderful rest of your week.